Hello there, welcome to 50 Shades and Grey, another episode. Today, I'm joined by Annabelle Jones, who is the chief editor at the Telegraph for beauty. Is that right, Annabelle?
Beauty editor at large is my official title. I'll
Beauty
take
editor.
chief editor though.
It's a promotion already. It's really quick.
Yeah.
So Annabelle's joined me today to talk about one of my favourite subjects, skincare, believe it or not. So just a brief overview. I really got into skincare when I was in my late teens, had horrendous acne, absolutely dreadful. And then at that time, the knowledge about acne and how to treat it was very basic. So I was using face creams, face masks, putting kiwis on my face and all different things. So that really got me into a routine of using products that I've always followed. So it's something that I'm actually really interested in. So there's lots of questions that I want to ask you, Annabelle. Firstly, starting
Okay, go ahead.
with the acne thing, because I know there's a lot of parents out there who have probably got kids that are getting into that age. And like I
Yeah.
said already, it's an area that I had a lot of experience with, and I know that as a kid it has a massive effect on you going up through sort of like
Yeah.
late teens, early 20s. So what can they do to help that now?
Thankfully, I didn't have acne growing up, but I feel like it's more common. And acne is, generally speaking, a hormonal issue. So my personal feeling is that, of course, you can get your teens or your preteens into their skincare early and looking after their skin. But I think that what we're seeing at the moment is that there's also young people are sort of almost creating a little bit of damage to their skin because they're trying to treat it. They're using TikTok for advice and using sort of anti-aging actives and acids on their face. And so we all have this kind of protective barrier to our skin, which is made up of lipids. And what you don't want to do is use really harsh products that are going to damage that protective layer, because then your skin becomes even more sensitive. So my advice really, honestly, is to go to the GP as soon as possible. And they should take you on, because really, when it comes to something like acne, you really want a doctor to be sort of keeping an eye on it. You don't really want to treat it yourself. And I know it can be expensive to see a dermatologist, but that would be my recommendation. But if you go to the GP, they'll start you off on something like, there's a cream called Duac, which they'll probably start you on, and then they might try some antibiotics. And then if that doesn't work, eventually you'll get referred to a dermatologist. But I do think that with acne, it's one of those things that we should be leaving in the hands of medical professionals as much as possible.
Because taking back to something that you said just now that I wanted to talk about actually, you mentioned TikTok, and I've
Mm.
had a brief experience of that age group using TikTok as almost like an advice line where they're making their own,
Yeah.
you know, coffee grounds and some bizarre concoctions that
Yeah.
maybe they do work. I don't know, but is that becoming more of a problem now?
It's a huge problem. And I think that, I think you've got to remember that TikTok is like, it's there for entertainment. And just because something works for somebody else, it's not as if, I think it's great for sort of makeup tutorials. Makeup washes off at the end of the night, it causes no harm. But if you're going to follow skincare advice from somebody on TikTok, I mean, there's loads of all the American dermatologists are amazing, and all of them are on TikTok. So I would just take advice from a proper dermatologist or a doctor when it comes to acne, particularly. And then what's happening at the moment is what they're calling the Sephora Kids trend. So there's like the alphas, so the ones that are younger than Gen Z, are starting to use like retinols and all of these glycolic acids and these things that are, created for, they're anti-aging ingredients for people our age. So yeah, and they're creating a lot of sensitivity. And so then dermatologists are reporting this rise in sensitivity. So I would say TikTok is great, it's fun, it's entertaining, but I wouldn't take my skincare advice from anyone who wasn't a professional.
Yeah, so getting into the creams then, so something that you just said then, I would assume, and as I spoke to you off air about this actually, and my knowledge of all of this is very, very basic, so
Mm,
excuse my ignorance, but I would have assumed that when it says anti-aging, that's okay to
yeah,
use at any age because ultimately you want to stop your skin looking older
Mm.
in an ideal world. So is that not a good idea to start not aging at sort of young 20s, teenage, or is there ingredients in it that are not good for you then?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, typically the word anti-aging or the phrase anti-aging is being phased out. And, you know, we shouldn't be anti-aging, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, what you want to start doing early is you want a good skincare routine. So you want to cleanse your skin regularly. You want to take your makeup off so you're not sleeping in your makeup if you're, wearing makeup. You want to use a cleanser that's sort of gentle and it's pH balanced, so it's not stripping your skin, even if you've got acne. And then you want to use maybe a moisturizer and definitely an SPF as early as possible. I mean, I think there's new research out that, most people are still not using SPF daily, and it causes most of the damage. Aging is caused by the sun, and even through a window, and even, I think 40% of sun damage is caused between, I don't know if that's the exact percentage, but a lot of sun damage is caused from sort of November to May, so even when the sun's not shining. So that's what I would recommend for somebody young, is to get into a good cleansing routine, moisturize and wear SPF, and that's it. I mean, nobody should be using any acids or retinols or vitamin C even on a very young skin, because you don't want to disrupt that protective barrier that's there for a reason. It stops you from, otherwise then pollutants and toxins and all these things are getting into the skin, creating sort of more problems later on down the line.
So in terms of sort of like a routine, like you said
Yeah.
already in the evening, it's basically just a cleanser, a night. Is there any difference between like a nighttime moisturizer and a daytime
Yeah.
moisturizer, or are they just packaged different to sell two products instead of one?
Well, typically they'll have different ingredients. So for example, if we keep it basic, during the night, you might want something a little bit more moisturizing, but typically that's when you would use something like a retinol or a retinoid. So there's different types of retinoids. So there's retinol, there's retinol, and that's an anti-aging ingredient that also helps with acne. And you're meant to, if you want to use it, you're meant to use it sort of start very slow, use a quite low percentage, build up to it. So those are the ingredients that you might use at night, because you wouldn't want to use retinol during the day because it makes your skin more sensitive to the sun. So I don't think it is just a packaging thing. I think there are different ingredients that they put in at nighttime when your skin is regenerating, and basically our cells in our body are regenerating at night. But I've typically not always used a night cream. I cleanse at night. Obviously, I'll put moisturizer on. I keep my routine quite basic. And then in the morning, typically that's when you might use like a vitamin C, which is collagen boosting and brightens the skin and gives it that sort of radiance. So yeah, you just use different ingredients at different times of the day.
There was a couple of things there that I'm going to get to in a moment, actually, with the collagen and the vitamins and the minerals. Typically, what I've noticed is when I'm going into buy creams now, is that, and men's, I think, skincare has become more and more commonplace. It used to be sort of, well, you don't need moisturisers, you're a man. And I've always done it
Mm.
anyway. And I've always got Zach to do it since a young age as well. But they do seem to be better priced than a lot of the women's brands. Is that because they're not as advanced, or is there a reason for that, or is that just my imagination anyway?
Well, I don't. My honest answer is I don't know, but I would assume I do know that definitely you're right. I mean, men's skincare, men's grooming, all of it is definitely on the up. It's growing considerably, and could be a couple of reasons. One is that either the companies that already have women's products, they're producing similar things that maybe they don't have the same expensive ingredients, or maybe they price the men's a little bit lower to sort of get them to buy into the brand. Then once they start using it, they'll buy more of it, because I do remember somebody at one of the brands telling me that men don't, there is a limit about how much they'll want to spend on their skincare. So they probably have to market it slightly differently. And I did interview a dermatologist the other day about men's skincare and men's aesthetic treatments. And she did say more or less the skin is the same. And so you need the same ingredients at the same time of life. But obviously, you're shaving, so you might have sort of ingrown hairs or sort of sensitivity around that might need some certain different ingredients. Like there's often sort of cooling ingredients or things like that in men's products that you wouldn't necessarily find in the women's ones. But also these days, a lot of the packaging is meant to be sort of genderless, because I think there is this assumption now that we can all share the same thing. And so, yeah, there's loads of brands that are just marketed for both.
Well, I was going to say, that was my other question as well, because I'm sure that a lot of men will go into the bathroom in the evening, and if there's a cream on the side and they can use it, it doesn't matter who it's for, they're going to probably put it on their
Yeah.
face anyway. So it's nice to know there's not a lot of difference between the men's and the men's and the women's. So in terms of price, though, because that's the other thing, and I think this is with all products. There are ones that I know, creams go from over £100, £200, £300, and then you've got the price comes down. There seems to be a massive difference in the price.
Yeah.
Is the price justified in what you pay for something?
Well, sometimes, yes. I mean, as you can imagine, in my job, I've tried all the products, so the very expensive ones and the very cheap ones. I think it depends. So, like, if you were taking, I don't know if you've heard of the Augustina Spada, the cream, it's quite a sort of famous cream that's 200 and something pounds. So that's got a complex in it that is patented. It was sort of created by this sort of professor and bioscientist who found this ingredient that was sort of like treating burns victims, and he's sort of packaged it up and put it in a cream, and it has this sort of, it works by sort of communicating with the cells to sort of make more collagen and elastin and effectively heal itself. And also they do a lot of clinical trials, and clinical trials can cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. So there's lots that go, some of those expensive creams are expensive because they're doing the trials, they're testing things, etc. Or they have a proprietary ingredient that costs a lot of money. And there's certain ingredients that, for example, a retinol, you'll get like what's called an encapsulated retinol, where they encapsulate it into this little microscopic lipid structure so that it's better absorbed into the skin, causes less sensitivity. That's an expensive technology. Whereas other ingredients, there's other ways of doing things that are less expensive. However, if you think that sort of a lot of the expensive brands, like the L'Oreal group or the Estee Lauder group, they own a lot of brands, some of them, so they can share technology. So you can get a L'Oreal Paris vitamin C serum that is perhaps just as good as anything more expensive, because they have access to this incredible team of scientists and all of this research that they've done on all of their brands. So I think there's loads of great things that are reasonably priced. I mean, we were talking before about the Boots No. 7.
That's
So
right.
I
Yeah.
know the main scientist who worked on their latest serum, Future Renew, that last summer I think it came out, and I think they had like an 88,000 waiting list, and it's 10 years of research, and it's a peptide serum that's as good as any other, if not better. And they've got loads of clinical trials about seeing that it actually reverses sun damage over the course of a year. And that would be, we've got that here. So that's this one. That's a peptide serum, and it's I think like £30. I
Who's
mean,
that
I'd
again?
recommend that to anybody.
Is that not
Boots.
enough?
So No. 7 is the brand, and it's like Boots is kind of. I'm sure a lot of your
Yeah. No.
followers will
No.
know.
I've got a few. I've got a couple of those actually.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're not doing
So,
any good, obviously, but
um,
I am using them.
but you've got to remember with skincare, this is what I sort of try to say to people. Like, it's like anything. It's like compounding. It's like if you go to the gym, every day for a week, it's not going to make as much difference if you go sort of like do little and often over the course of like a year. And it's the same with skincare. You just need to get into a routine and do it regular, but also know that some of these products can, like, fade pigmentation or reduce wrinkles slightly. But ultimately, there is a limit to what creams can do. And I think that, aging well is kind of know, it's boring to say it, but it's everything from what you eat to, how happy you are and all of that kind of stuff. So we do need to kind of have, I'm not into like those really big claims about reducing wrinkles by 500%. And, I don't think that's the case. But I do think you can get really great products for reasonable prices. And I think that's nice to know.
So,
Um,
so on that, what when you say about products, what would be, let's say, your five key products to have in your wash bag or your overnight bag or in your bathroom? What would they be?
okay, well, I'm going to show you what I'm using at the moment, because obviously I sort of have to try a lot of stuff. So, um, I'm always swapping out my favorites. But you want a really good cleanser that, well, if we're talking about people our age, so when you get older, specifically if you're in the menopause transition, your skin's going to be drier. It's going to have less ceramides, which are essentially the way to think of ceramides is they're like the mortar between the bricks. So as we get older, we lose a lot of those ceramides and those lipids. So your skin's kind of almost like leaking moisture. So it just gets drier. And so you want something that's going to replace that. So I'm using this brand called Cetaphil or Cetaphil. It's at Boots. It's really reasonably priced, and that's like a foaming wash, but it's also got ceramides in it. So you cleanse your face, but it doesn't feel tight or stripped. Like you don't want that feeling. You want it to
I
feel
thought that was a good thing.
still moisturized. It's not, no. I mean, you
Uh,
don't want
uh,
any alcohol in a product. You don't want something, you want to be like, I always double cleanse. I'm kind of, I do my cleanse in the shower with something like that. And then, but prior to that, especially at night, I might use like a balm, something sort of more pampering with like a hot cloth. So I sort of take all my makeup off and then I'll do a second cleanse. So I'm really big into cleansing. And you can kind of make it into like a nice little ritual for yourself. So you want all the makeup gone, you want all the dirt and all the impurities and all of that stuff cleansed. But if your skin feels tight and uncomfortable, to me, that's not a good sign. That means you're compromising your skin barrier, which I keep going on about, but that is important. Then you would want, I mean, we're just talking about skincare here, not makeup, but then you'd want some kind of serum. Your serum is your next step, and that's like where you're doing your treatment. So whether you're looking for sort of like a anti-wrinkle or something brightening, that would be your next step. I mean, that Boots number seven's Future Renew is good in the morning and night because it doesn't have any acids or retinols or anything. It's just a peptide serum. So it's kind of having anti-aging benefits, but it's not creating any sensitivity. And then you'd put on your moisturizer, but in the summer, I sometimes just use a moisturizing SPF. So I like this one by Supergoop, which is SPF 50, and these days a lot of the SPFs are sort of much nicer. They're really fluid and sheer, and they don't. I think a lot of people think of facial SPF like using your sun cream on your face, and it can be really greasy. But if you buy a specific one for the face, often they're quite transparent now, and they don't leave that kind of white cast on your face. And then what else would I say? Maybe also vitamin C. So I use the skin suit. This is expensive. This is like £180.
what?
But
Wow.
SkinCeuticals is the one. Yeah, it's very expensive.
How long will that last?
You need a couple of drops a day. Probably last like at least a month, if not 2 months. This is 15% ascorbic acid, which is the vitamin C. But it's the only thing I've used. Vitamin C is the only thing I've used where I've really noticed within a couple of weeks a good difference to my skin. So it just looks like a little bit more radiant and a little bit more even, a little bit brighter. I put that on in the day. There are, good lesser priced vitamin C serums, but SkinCeuticals is the one that did most of the research on vitamin C originally. So that's one. And I think you want to get quite a good vitamin C because it's a very unstable ingredient. So you want one that's formulated so that it stays, potent, and you want something in a dark bottle and you want to keep it out of the sun. Those would be my main things. I mean, I'm pretty simple when it comes to skincare. I'm very
Yeah.
much just consistently apply your SPF, do your cleansing, put your treatment serum on. I don't use loads and loads of layers. I don't use 15 steps. I don't think that's necessary.
So going back to what you were just saying about vitamin C, what's the difference? Because that's what I wanted to talk about as well. What's the difference between putting vitamin C on your skin as opposed to taking vitamin C through a tablet or a drink? In terms of, does that
Mm.
have the same effect or not?
Well, I think with supplements, I mean, you're getting more of a global effect. So obviously, if you're putting a vitamin C serum on your skin, you're getting, as a topical treatment, you're getting the benefit on your skin. I mean, so when it comes to supplements, I mean, there's a really good vitamin C, a liposomal vitamin C by a brand called Altriant, I think it's called. But there's all sorts of things when you ingest something that, it's got to sort of, it's got to be absorbed properly into the system. And, you know, the supplement industry is pretty vast, and some of them don't have a lot of good sort of science behind them. So you're not really sure what you're getting. I don't think it's regulated that well. But I do know one of the doctors that I respect a lot said to me that she is like a longevity expert doctor who has a private clinic, and she said the vitamins that most people are deficient in is vitamin D, which is good for your immunity, and obviously you need vitamin D just in general. We tend to lack it in this country. B vitamins, which give you energy, magnesium, and what was the other one? It'll come to me in a minute. But those three, she seemed to think that most of her patients that she tests are lacking in those things, and like magnesium will help you sleep. I wouldn't. I think you have to be careful with vitamin supplements.
So is there a good what in terms of a one sort of a one multivitamin does it, or is there one that you would recommend for people to actually take? Because otherwise you're taking
Um,
like 5 or 6 different sort of tablets sometimes. If you're taking vitamin sort of
well, what
B and
I take, yeah. I mean, oh, sorry, the other one was omega threes.
megas. Okay,
So, right. So I take those separately. I take omega threes, I take B vitamin, I take magnesium glycinate, and vitamin D. And I prefer to take them separately rather than taking a multivitamin. But I'm sure multivitamin is perfectly fine. I just, just from all of my research and interviewing various people, supplements, that's the advice I was given. So
so
yeah.
what I'm thinking is that people watching this may be thinking, yeah, that's all very well, but I'm getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've got 3 kids to
Mm.
get to school. I've got to do 4 different breakfasts, and then I've got to get homework done. So, and then you've got all these things to do, or whether you've just got to get to work. I guess it's finding the time to do all of those things as well. So if people are saying like, where do I get the time to do all that? I haven't got time to do all that in the morning because I'm too busy running around after everyone else. Not that there's an answer to that, because that's the way that life is. It's fast and crazy. But what would
Mm.
your advice be to those people?
In terms of vitamin supplements or just in
No, just in
general?
terms of like, where would I find the time? That's why I'm saying sometimes, like, is there just one tablet that I can go, right, I'm taking that, that's covered me for everything? Because it's finding time to sort of, and I know they only seem like sort of seconds, but if you're cleansing and doing everything, sometimes people don't get 20 minutes to themselves in the morning in the bathroom on their own
Yeah.
without sort of 2, 3 kids running in and wanting this and wanting that and where's my PE kit?
Yeah. Well, I relate to that. I have twins. They've fled the nest now. They're at university, but I've always, even, in spite of the fact that I'm a beauty editor and I've always had access to all of the products and all of the advice, I've always had a very simple routine. So simple that people are shocked. And so when I say, oh, use a vitamin C in the morning, and if you want to use a retinol at night, that doesn't mean you have to do those things. I mean, really, uh, you can cleanse your skin in the shower, put on a moisturizing SPF, and you've done. That's the most important thing you can do. If you want to add a serum in and do other things, I mean, that's why I was saying I think you don't. There was this trend at one point for these sort of Korean rituals of 12 steps, and you know, I don't do any of that. I just make sure that like I look after my skin in a really
Yeah,
basic way. And then I do take those supplements. I mean, I would say that doesn't take much time. It's more of
yeah.
an investment of cost. So, But if you're going to choose anything, I'd say take vitamin D every day. It's just really great for your immunity, and also omega-3s. And that would be my advice if anybody wanted to take supplements. But if you're, look, the best supplement is your diet. If you're eating, oily fish 3 times a week, then you maybe don't need an omega-3 supplement. If you're going out and getting sunlight every morning for 15 minutes, then you might not need vitamin D. But, to your point about us all having busy lifestyle, often that isn't the case, right? So, so I think, like, if we're talking about aging well, it is sort of just how you're looking after yourself, and that
Yeah.
can be quite basic.
So one of the other things that you mentioned a few times is as an ingredient, and I became aware of it 3 or 4 years ago, that suddenly people started talking about sort of collagen. And I know that
Yeah.
there's all different brands that seem to have been coming out the last couple of years. And I started using it, and then it lasted for about 6 months because I ran out. And then it's when it starts getting more and more expensive, you start looking at the cheaper brands. So for me, I was just going
Yeah.
on Amazon and like, well, that one's about £4. I'm going to get that instead of the one that I was buying before that was like sort of £50, £60. So the benefits of collagen, the difference in the price. I know that you have marine collagen, don't you? And what are the difference between them all and the benefits of it, and how important is it to actually take as a separate sort of powder almost?
So I think the jury's out on collagen. I don't think there's enough of a body of evidence yet, but there are some studies that show that it improves your skin. And I think those studies, it tends to be recommended that marine collagen is proven to be the most bioavailable. And then you also have bovine collagen. And then there's vegan, like plant-based collagen. So in terms of the science, my understanding is that marine collagen is the one with the most proof behind it. And then you might take like a powder with like a smoothie or, a drink. I think the thing is, so collagen is the body's main structural protein, right? And when I was talking earlier about number seven's Future Renew serum, that is a peptide serum, which essentially is like a collagen peptide that signals to your cells to make more collagen. So that's one way of getting more collagen on your skin, is to do it topically with a peptide. And then internally, there's a brand called Ingenious Collagen. They've done some nice studies with like King's College London that have proven that they've seen an improvement in skin through taking these collagen supplements. And then there's obviously the powder. I think that there's some suggestion that how much of it you actually absorb and how much of it sort of survives the stomach acid and all of that stuff. I don't know enough about it, but I do think that it can be beneficial, but I don't think it's like a miracle thing. I don't think you're going to start taking collagen and all of a sudden look 10 years younger. I'd rather put my money into a really good omega-3 supplement personally. But it's funny because if we ever write about anything to do with collagen on the newspaper, I mean, it does so incredibly well. So people are 100% interested in collagen because that's a lot of those aesthetic treatments and things are designed to like prompt your skin to heal itself. So like if you get a scar or you cut yourself, your body heals itself by producing more collagen to sort of repair that skin. And so that I think that people are interested because everybody knows more collagen means firmer, younger, springier, glowier skin essentially.
So obviously, after all of this, there is the other sort of trending, and I live in an area where particularly where it's quite in demand, is that failing all of that, there is cosmetic surgery, obviously, and that seems to be sort of like a growing trend. And I've noticed that seems to be becoming more prevalent in younger ages now, with the fillers
Yeah.
and lip fillers and this filler, and even at ages where I think, do you really need it at such a young age? Is that becoming more of something that's going into people's rituals for actually, well, I'll get fillers for this and I'll get like injections for that, and where is that now? Does that sit in the market, sort of cosmetic surgery?
Well, I mean, it's definitely massive and it's growing. There's kind of two things going on though, because I think, on social media, there was a lot of people who were becoming very overfilled and sort of that became a kind of look. So I think it started out, Botox and filler started out as sort of, you know, for the older generations to, well, you had a little bit of lip filler, which was a cosmetic enhancement, but essentially you were filling or you were doing Botox to sort of look younger. And then that, younger and younger and younger people started having, the following celebrities and social media started having filler. And then it had a bit of a backlash. So I wrote a big piece about this in the Telegraph a few months ago about, is filler about to be cancelled? Because loads of celebrities were coming out and saying that they'd had their fillers dissolved and they wish they'd never done it. So there is a bit of a backlash. And in this country in particular, I think the British Beauty Council are in consultation with the government because anyone can inject filler. I mean, this is the problem. Like if you go to a qualified doctor who's trained in aesthetic medicine is very different to going to, your facialist who's done a 3-day course, because it can be, to inject filler into your face, particularly around the eyes, and there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. I mean, you can go blind, you can get sort of necrosis and tissue death, and or your filler sort of starts migrating. I did a feature on sort of a return to facelifts the other day, and I interviewed some plastic surgeons who were saying, when they go and do surgery, they can find, sort of scar tissue from filler, all around the nerves, and they've got to sort of dissect it and remove it. So, and they now think that filler lasts a lot longer than we initially thought. So people will typically sometimes be topping up their filler like every 6 months, but they can see now through sort of technology that filler can last up to 10 years. And there's different densities. It's a bit of a minefield. There's different densities of fillers. There's some that are meant to be structural, that they inject closer to the bone. There's much thinner ones that they might use in the lips and under eyes and so on. But you really, really, really should be going to like a qualified doctor for any kind of injectable in your face. And I know it's more expensive, but I think that if that's what you're going to do, that's what I would recommend. And I do think we're going to see a big backlash in all of those things, because ultimately it can be really addictive. I mean, there's a lot of studies to show that. Once you have filler once, you then, that becomes your new normal. You then start looking at other areas of your face and thinking, well, I could get that done and that done, and before you know it, you really lost touch with reality. So I'm not against it, because I think in some cases it can really improve someone's confidence, but I really think we need to slow down and actually make sure we're being safe and like doing proper research and doing it for the right reasons.
That would be the argument, wouldn't it? I suppose no matter what your thoughts are on it, for the individual, their argument may be, well, look, if it makes me feel better about how I look and that, and my mental health, my mental state, if that improves that, then what's the harm in it? I suppose that would be the argument.
Yeah, I mean, of course, and like I said, I'm not against anybody having anything, having a surgery or fillers or Botox, but I just think when it comes to filler in particular, it can go, you're injecting something into your face, it's a foreign substance, and I just think we need to, my recommendation just would always be to just visit a medical doctor to have it done if that's what you're doing. And there are a lot of cases where things have gone wrong. So yeah, I think we've seen it sort of turn into a trend, a certain look.
Yeah.
And obviously, the best procedures, in my opinion, are the ones where doctors are kind of, they're working with your natural features and sort of, enhancing, as opposed to sort of covering up or changing completely. But like, you're right, it's each to their own. I mean, if somebody's happy, that's fine. I just would, you don't want to get to sort of start having filler. I mean, now they're talking about in the States that, sometimes people's Botox or filler is not actually the proper brand. It's, black market. And, you do have to be careful. You need to know what's going into your body. So that would be what I would say. And also there's other things you can do. So you don't have to have filler. You can have like radio frequency, which sort of tightens the skin with light therapy and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of alternatives.
So finally, I wanted to come to another subject that I know you've done a lot of work on as well, and it's something that you mentioned earlier on. So we spoke about sort of people with young kids, but then there's also that
Mm,
time that when your kids start to leave, and
mm,
then I think there's a term now like this empty nest syndrome that they, has been referred to, where people will find all of a sudden they've got a lot more time, and in that
mm.
time they can then invest in themselves and be for a long time. It's probably the first time they may realise, do you know
Yeah,
what? I can actually do something for me because there's no one asking me where my PE kit is now, and I've actually got
yeah,
time in the morning. And also, obviously, with menopause as well. And that coming, I know that's something that you've written a lot about and you're working on,
mm,
and looking to do more work on as well. So, just on that, is that what things would you say for people that are finding that time now that they can start doing that will help going forward with menopause as well?
yeah. I mean, so I recently, so last December, I turned, well, my kids, I have twins, so they both went at the same time. And, I'm divorced from their father. We have a good relationship. We live nearby, but essentially the house was empty when they went. And so I found that kind of devastating. And I wasn't expecting to feel as bad as I did because I'd been like the sole sort of kind of carer for so long, as in, they were in my house most of the time. And so I was thinking, oh God, like it's going to be such a sort of like good to have a bit of a break. But it was incredibly difficult for me. I wrote a whole piece about it actually for the Telegraph. And so I think there is this transition period where you really need to give yourself time. It's like for me, it felt like I was grieving, and it was a really weird feeling, like I was grieving. I knew they were coming back in the holidays and all of that stuff, and my daughter calls me every day, and so. But it was more like I just thought, my God, it's all over. Like A levels was very stressful. Before that, it was GCSE and it was COVID, and I just sort of had this whole like panic that, oh my God, I didn't do that whole parenting thing the way I wanted to do it. It was all a bit of a mess, and I wish I could redo it all. And so I do think that emptiness thing is really, really hard. And I think there are benefits to it. Like you say, you can start looking after yourself. But I think you do need to give yourself time to just adjust. And I did find it a real shock. And then, of course, like at this age, also, I mean, I went through menopause quite early actually, but I had really, really terrible symptoms. And yeah, it really knocked me. So I think you need to be really kind to yourself. You need to really give yourself some time. But I know it's really annoying to say, but like exercise and eating well and all that stuff really helps with menopause symptoms. And of course, there's HRT, which is, not suitable for everyone. But that's, GPs are a lot more sort of clued up on all of that now. Yeah, and one of the things that does actually happen, speaking of collagen, during menopause, like I mean, I think you lose like 30% of your collagen in like the first 5 years of menopause. That can be sort of mitigated through HRT, but that's another thing. So your skin does start to, you know, um, lose some firmness, and so there's all these things that are happening at once. I think sometimes, especially for women, like kids are leaving home at the same time that they're going through menopause, and so it can be a lot, and it is like a time to kind of start looking after yourself and pampering, but not to kind of put so much pressure on yourself because you need to sort of find your way, I think.
I've got to say, when you were saying that at the start, I was smiling, but I think I'm smiling nervously because I know, obviously, Zach's with me a lot of the time as well. So it's yeah, having him not here would be very strange, actually. So I was smiling in a very nervous way, thinking, "Oh, I'm not looking forward to that at all," because you just get
Yeah,
used
and I
to.
think being around, it's like the in fact, it's interesting you say that because when I wrote this piece about empty nest, there was a male colleague who worked in a different department who happened to sort of overhear that I was writing about this, and he was going through the same thing. They just dropped off. Him and his wife had just dropped off. I think like the second son, so they'd already done it once, but this was sort of like the last one that had left. And he said he found it. He said something like, the whole frequency of the house had changed.
Yeah,
It does feel very. It's people don't speak about it enough, but it's really tough. But like Mike is now like in their final term of their first year, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're coming home for the whole like 4 months of the summer, and I'm gonna have to go back to like picking up after them, and like, my son will go out. They go out with their friends. He comes home at 2 o'clock in the morning and start cooking a steak, and I'm like, what are you doing? Um, so yeah, I mean, it has its blessings, but it can be, yeah, it's tough. Um,
And I think my mum's got three of us, so she's got three boys. And I think
mm,
during our time through our 20s, 30s, and 40s, we've all, for different reasons, had to go back home at some stage. So
yeah,
I think you've always got the house there for them. So I
yeah.
don't think you were ever rid of your kids, actually, which is a
Well, it's
nice
funny
thing.
because my daughter said to me the other day, randomly, she said, "Mum, when are you gonna kick me out? What age?" And I said, "I'm not gonna kick you out. I mean, that's not gonna happen." She thought that there was like this cutoff point where she had to like,
Change the
move
locks.
out. And I thought, yeah, I was like, no, that's not how it works. But yeah, so yeah, it's what parenting's like, and for anyone, it's like, it's such a blessing, but it also it's hard, it's tiring. So yeah, it's nice when they're home. I feel like I like having them around. I like that feeling, even though they don't spend any, they're always out with their friends, which is what they should be doing. But yeah, it is tough when they go. I mean, mine was, because I had both of them go, so it was like, ooh,
Going. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me today. I know
thank you for having me.
you're more than welcome. You've obviously, people can get your articles through the Telegraph. You're doing a lot of work on with the menopause as well, aren't you? And you're looking to start newsletters. So I'm going to put all Annabelle's links onto this podcast, and you can get them at the bottom and follow Annabelle. She's great. She gives you loads of good advice. As you can see, my skin is terrible, but it's getting better. it is getting better. Yes, thank you so much, Annabelle. We'll put all your links on, and we'll put the links to all the products on as well, so you can have a look at those. But thank you for joining us, and thank you again, Annabelle. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.